Thank you all for helping me reach 10K subscribers. I love you all folks. Without further ado, enjoy this biggest video I prepared for you. Stepped out behind the house to see the clear sky 2 nights ago. No moon, stars are out and beautiful. Unusually chilly, I turned to get my coat and come back out. Out of the corner of my eye I see a red light flashing in the tree line. I move further out into the yard, over an acre, to see if I can get a better glimpse. Decide I'm going after it, so I go inside to get a coat and come back out with a flashlight. Head deep into the yard with caution as we live next to nearly 100 acres of woodland. Notice deer are in the yard, following me. Head toward the light. As I get closer, deer family starts circling around me, 3 adults, a few fawns, forming a barrier around my body. Break through the tree line and get into a clearing, see the red light is now much further than I thought. Notice a second red light blinking a few dozen yards away from it, also near the tree line. Move closer, but see the deer who were following me stop and suddenly stare at the lights. Deer are frozen. I'm frozen. Lights shift. Deer bolt. I bolt. Turn around and see the lights still moving behind me. A third joins them. They are getting closer to our backyard. Turn off the flashlight and stop to stare again. Lights disappear all of a sudden. I can't find them in the trees anymore. One of the lights returns. It is much closer to me this time. F that. Go to bed. Too scared. Be camping in Pa with friend. By camping I mean cheating, had a cabin. Stoking fire on last night. Lil drunk. Running out of firewood. We hear this awful screech come from about 50 yards into the woods. Just this awful, high-pitched inhuman wail/shriek. Sounded like a female zombie alien mutant banshee getting graped was the only way to describe it. Both what.jpg. However, liquid courage convinces us it's safe to go collect firewood. Grab comedically named Machete, the pig's ticker, just in case. Seriously had the word pig's ticker written on the blade. Venture into woods, pitch dark, no flashlights. About 50 yards from the cabin, we both gather up an armful of logs, sticks, etc. We turn to head back, hear screech again, but sounds closer. Both spaghetti everywhere, start booking it down trail towards cabin. Friend is black, so of course I'm behind. About to get snagged.jpg. Last stretch of trail before cabin has a 10-foot bridge. Friend misses his footing, trips, and falls off bridge into mini stream 4 feet below. Legitimately concerned he landed on the pig's ticker, but still laughing my ass off. Remember I'm about to get graped by a mutant. Run past friend to cabin. He makes his way to cabin, said he had to chuck the pig's ticker while he fell cause he didn't wanna land on it. I go with him to the bridge to retrieve machete and logs he dropped. Feels like we're being watched. Don't hear screech again. Build fire to epic proportions, get drunker cause of fear. Nothing else really happened. We had no idea what the noise was for the rest of the trip, but I learned about a year later that foxes make noises like that sometimes. So probably nothing, but still funny/hilarious in the moment. I was invited to a country/lake house in Maine by the family of my girlfriend at the time, Sophie. Around late June/early July, spent my birthday/Independence Day there having barbecue and riding on a boat. We got into the newspaper that day. So my girlfriend and I know this guy called Scott who is a mutual friend I met through her friend Ruby. Scott was coming to pick us up in his car and take us out for the night, drinking and shit as teens do in America. The lake house is on the lake, and has a dirt road leading from it towards the main road. It's pretty long and angles upward. It's flanked on either side by woods. The lake house itself is completely solitary. Scott calls my ex while we're standing in the kitchen talking to her mom about tomorrow's events. My ex's sister was coming up from Florida that day, and we were all going to surprise her with a gift from the horse stables. She learned how to ride it as a kid. Bitch got a Frisian. So anyway, Scott calls her up and lets her know he's at the turn-off waiting for us, where the dirt road meets the main. Bastard doesn't want to drive down, the lazy cunt. So we decide screw it and make our way up the dirt road. We see him there in his pickup waiting far ahead. Slowly but surely I notice this figure standing in the middle of the dirt road. It's hard to make out though. As we got closer it looked like a woman dressed in white, with long dark hair to her ass. It was facing towards Scott. I thought it was a trick of the darkness or moon or some shit because the road is literally effing dark as hell. Didn't say anything because I didn't want to seem like a pussy. Being from the city, I wasn't sure what I was looking at, so I kept quiet. How would it look if I just noped out of there? As we're about 10 feet away from it, Sophie turns to me and asks, "Do you see that?" I said yes. As soon as I did we both turned and ran the freak back to the house. Longest run in my life it felt like. Didn't dare look back, just kept running. Get back into the house. Call Scott and order him to drive down. When he gets down to the house we ask him if he saw anything. Nah. Told him what we saw, he just laughed it off. Eventually got into the truck and headed up the dirt road. As we're halfway up, there is this loud freaking bang against the side of the passenger door. WTF was that? Was pretty much all our reactions. Scott sped up and we noped the freak out of there, ended up going to a gas station. When we got out of the pickup there was a massive dent in the door. Scott turns to us and asks, "What the hell did you guys see on the road before I drove down?" Explain everything to him again. He calls his uncle who is a cop, asks him to meet us at the gas station. He comes and we explain everything to him. He didn't seem surprised at all with anything we were saying. In the end he gave us a warning for underage drinking. Scott wasn't allowed to drive, and we all got into the back of his uncle's cruiser. He took us back to the house, and then left with Scott. Few days go by and we can't get a hold of him on his phone. End up seeing the white woman in the bushes near one of the 2 cabins on the lake house grounds, 3 total buildings. Scared freaking shitless our entire trip. I get chills just thinking about it even today. Happened in 2008. Sorry if it doesn't make much sense, I'm no writer, and I'm pretty tired, not sleeping too good. Be like 12. Camping with fat cousin in woods behind his house. Chilling with his weird friend Ian that day. Kid says he can see spirits and is odd as F, saying these woods are haunted and blah blah blah. Cousin has like 20 acres of land, we're camping about half a mile from his house. Just brings a box of cereal for himself to eat, cause fat. End up getting in fight with the Cocoa Puffs. Entire tent floor is now covered in Cocoa Puffs. Can't move without making crunching noises. Decide screw this and sleep inside. Next day we're cleaning up the Cocoa Puffs. Hear what sounds like 2 or 3 people walking around the tent. I'm 100% convinced it's a bear or some shit and we're all nice and pre-packaged. He says relax, it's probably just his dad or his brother's friends. We go look outside the tent not 7 seconds later and there is nothing around. MFW, Ian was right. Glad we didn't sleep outside. I know, who was phone ending, but it was weird. That kid always creeped the F out of me. My cousin and I would dabble in paranormal shit too. We tried to figure out if his bro was a werewolf once. Captcha, Jarite notes. Be camping with best mate in a forest literally next to a beach in NSW, AUS. Proper camping in swags and cooking soup in a large pot over a fire. Fire running low so soup isn't really cooking. Both decide to walk to beach to find some dry driftwood, that shit lights up really easily. Be making our way back to camp and start hearing screeching coming from that direction. Cautiously walk back to camp and see something moving around our swags. From a distance see our soup pot tipped over, fire is now only glowing embers and one of the swags dissembled. Pretty pissed off but assume it was some sort of animal. Start fixing everything, relighting fire and whatnot. When fire starts going again can see a bit more. Catch a glimpse of a human-like creature walk behind a bush. Had long skinny limbs, walked on all fours and elbows were inverted, bending the wrong way, very pale skin, sort of like the gif of something opening a room door and walking in on all fours. Just stop and look at each other like WTF was that? Hear the screech again come from behind the bush. Starting to nope. Re-emerges from behind bush and makes its way over to us, screeching. Book it to the beach and walk to civilization, about 10 kilometers away. Find a hotel and stay there the night. Catch taxi back to forest in the morning and walk to camp. Nothing there. All swags, fire, clothes gone. Literally like we were never there. Find a pile of dead squirrels behind the bush where that thing was hiding. WTF out of there, go home, never speak of it again. B14. Have nightmare. Feel a depression at the end of the mattress, like someone sitting down. Slowly moving out of nightmare / coming awake. Feel a second depression near stomach. Feel a third depression near head, very strong. Hear voice yell WTF are you doing? GTFO as fast as possible. Explain situation to friend sleeping in living room. Friend thought he felt presences in the room before, so willingly goes back with me. All the sheets that were on the bed are torn off and on the floor. Shaken, we sit down on the bed and discuss. Out of freaking nowhere, Xbox controllers in his cupboard start to vibrate non-stop. Friend pulls them out of the cupboard, turns them off. I say, if that was you, do it again. Controllers come on again. Friend goes to stop them. They stop on their own. It was at said friend's house. Never went back in there alone. Not really creepy forest but pick related is where it happened, UK Manchester. Posted this in another thread but the thread was dead. About 2 years ago I was at a friend's house with my girlfriend, his girlfriend, and his cousin and it got late so I walked my GF home. I cut across a small field to cut the walk by a good 20 minutes. After I dropped my GF home I set off back across the field. Keep in mind it was winter and it was pitch black 10 p.m. As I got to the opening to the field I got a phone call from my friend's GF, we'll call her G, saying her dad had gone missing and to look out for him on the way home. I said okay, put the phone down and continued on like the cocky brave freaker I was. As I got to the top of a little hill about 5 minutes into my walk I heard angry shouting, not casual angry though, mental shouting, the shit you hear in hospitals. He was shouting where the F are you, I'll effing kill you, you twats. I freaking noped it and froze at the top of the hill and phoned G and told her what I heard. She got her mum, brother boyfriend and BFS cousin to come meet me to help the search which I never effing agreed to. I was teamed up with GS big brother to scout the darker parts of the field. In the end we were walking around for a good hour shouting for GS Dad every now and then hearing a shout. Eventually I got a phone call from G saying they found him and to gather back on the street. GS Dad was stood there totally fine saying he went for a walk and didn't hear any shouting, not even us shouting for him. We walked off turning round every now and then to check on GS Dad. After about 4 times of turning round he freaking snapped and screamed at us, "What the F are you looking at?" And we all know .jpgd back home. I still don't know what the hell happened that night and I don't dare delve deeper into it as it effing terrifies me. Red to the right is where we eventually found him, blue is where I first heard him. Be 20 years old. Completely lost in life. Loner. Drive by myself to the nearby town of Yellow Springs to unwind in the wilderness. Beautiful woods. Hippies and Wiccans everywhere. Go to local ice cream parlor. Sitting alone. A girl named Dahlia approaches me. Beautiful white dress, reeks of marijuana. Flowers in her hair. Beautiful. What's your name? I'm Anon. We make small talk and have a lot in common. We walk around the woods. Laugh and flirt all day. She's taking a liking to me. She grabs my hand and leads me into a small cave with a waterfall. Laughing, she pulls out a flask and we drink. We start kissing and I get laid for the first time in a year. She's amazing. It's now getting strikingly dark. The woods are pitch black. She starts telling me about the local witch covens and legends. She pulls out a book from her leather satchel. It's riddled with esoteric markings and sketches. She mentions something about 9 angels. Have no idea what she's talking about. We end up making a shrine of some sort with rocks. I laugh nervously while she says nonsensical words. She coaxes me into staying with her at the cave for the night for fun. We continue to drink all kinds of shit. Have the most amazing sex I've ever had. We cuddle up on the cold cave floor and sleep. She tells me she loves me. I tell her the same. Wake up. She's gone. There's mysterious residue and what seems like blood all over the cave floor and walls. In a panic I yell for her. Wander the woods aimlessly. Nothing. Return to the town. Head to the ice cream parlor searching. They say they've never heard of a Dahlia. Look everywhere. Eventually give up once it got dark. Checked the cave. Empty, nothing on the walls or floor anymore. I'd give anything to see her again. I make a return trip once a week in some sort of feeble hope I'll run into her again. Pick related, it's the cave. Be about 10 or 11. Live next to the woods, spend most of my days wandering in it, talking to myself, playing. There was this condo complex, a house down that also had woods behind it, up on a hill. I'd usually play in my backyard, go across the neighbor's yard which was like a field, and go up the hill and play behind there. One day I'm walking across the field and look up. There's someone standing on top of the hill, behind the trees, looking down at me. No one is ever behind there, it's like he's waiting for me. I think it's a guy, he's got jeans and a gray hoodie on, with the hood up, and I can see like greasy black hair coming out of the hood, and he's really pale. Stare up at him, he's completely motionless. Start to get scared. My mom watched a lot of crime dramas and stuff like that, so it made me a little paranoid. I run back home and don't play back there again. Not really creepy but still a paranormal story about forests. Warning, green text and shit grammar. Living in the countryside of Vermont. Surrounded by forests. Wake up every night on the full moon and new moon from a dream. Dream is about dancing around a tree in the middle of forest. Wake up and have a crazy desire to find the place in my dreams. First couple times I'd sneak out into the woods no matter what season in kindergarten. Never felt the need for a flashlight, even though I'm scared of the dark. Eventually my mother catches me sneaking out to go to this place. Keeps my door locked at night to make sure I don't get myself killed. Still have the dreams. Use my window to sneak out of. One time my mother caught me as I was about to sneak out and told me she was worried I'd get lost or eaten by coyotes. I told her I always arrived there safely. Tells me not tonight, go back to bed. I feel a deep loneliness, completely isolated. Continue to sneak out. Around freshman year I denied the feeling as I though it was childish and there was no point to visit at night. Still have dreams. No matter how much I look for the place I can't find it. I always ventured in the forest but have no memory of what I did every time I reached the tree. As silly as it is, now that I'm in college I really miss that weird time. I used to live in Dolly, a small town within the borough of Telford in the West Midlands, UK. I was 8 at the time this happened. I lived within a 2-minute walk to the woods. Me and my childhood friend Frankie, who lived a few doors down from me, decided that the best place to play football was the grass field next to the woods, so I agreed and we went to play football. After around 20 minutes of football, we got bored and I come up with the genius idea of making a secret den in the woods. We began walking into the woods, which we had been in many times. We decided that we should go to the part of the woods we hadn't been to before. We walked along one of the dirt tracks and stopped to climb a small tree which didn't have much of a trunk. It had large branches stemming out at around a foot high. After getting bored again, we started walking deeper into the part we hadn't been in before. There was a sudden drop into a small crater. Intrigued, I walked round the drop to a dirt path that connected to the bottom of the crater. There was some sort of stone foundations, like a wall. At the bottom of the wall, I noticed something orange. I approached it and realized that it was a fox pelt. It was pretty cool. It was the first dead animal I had ever seen, so I called my friend down. He walked round the drop to the dirt path, the same way I did. When he got to the bottom, he told me he heard some metal screeching coming from further down the dirt path. I didn't really care, though. I was more fascinated by this dead fox in front of me. I picked up a stick and started poking the torso of the fox. Don't ask, we all do stupid stuff when we're little. The last time I poked it, the pelt rolled over. I froze. Frankie froze. We turned and faced each other with fright in our eyes. It was a skull. A human skull. We grabbed the football and ran back to his house. His 17-year-old brother was the only person in the house. After calming down, we asked him about the Big Dip in the woods as we called it back then. He told us it was called the Witch's Parlor and that back in 1500s and 1600s witches used to take refuge in the woods when being hunted. 9 years later, I add my childhood friend on Facebook. We start talking and get on really well because he told me that he had been smoking weed for 2 years and at the time, I smoked weed as well. He asked to meet up so we did and decided that I would sleep at his house, the same house in which just a few doors down from my old house. We got stoned, played on his Xbox 360 and started having a childhood memory talk. I brought up the skull under the pelt and he said he remembered. He told me that he had a nightmare the same night which we went to the Witch's Parlor. He explained his nightmare was us walking the same route into the woods but there was a third person. He described the person as a pure black shadow figure with no face, eyes, mouth, or ears. After the pelt had rolled over, he said the shadow figure's face suddenly turned into a horrifying pure white face, with pitch black eyes, burnt lips. It began screaming, in which he could only describe as a distorted cat screech. That was when he woke up. Pick related, it's the area of the woods. Captcha, for which. On a hike one day, roaming through the Peak District, UK, by myself. Quite late in the summer evening, was planning on setting up a small camp for the night somewhere close by. Scour the horizon for good forested spots, great for shelter from wind. Suddenly hearing something shift behind me. It's a deer. Throw a twig at it in frustration for making me jump, it runs away. Head for the woods across a grassy meadow, making sure to keep my eye out for any ditches in the grass. My mate broke his leg in a deep hole in the past. Notice something writhing in the grass up ahead. Wildlife ecologist, so I head over to make sure it isn't a distressed animal trapped in something. Suddenly, it bolts, was probably a fox. I make it to the tree line, start feeling a little off, like something is watching me. Very dark now, need to set up camp no matter what. As I'm setting up, a guy comes charging through the freaking bushes screaming something about a big dog up ahead. It had bit him in the leg. Was bleeding bad. I offer to patch him up, let him stay with me for the night. He's a cool guy, we share stories, have a few beers I brought along. Midway through the night I wake up to find him leaving the camp, says he needs to check on something he heard. Never comes back. I freak the F out. Head hurts due to beer and no sleep. So I put my head down for a second, get up, something catches my eye from under nearby log. Effing human skull. Packed up my small tent. Freaking ran for my life. Be deer hunting. Drive INNAWOODS. Back INNAWOODS about a mile back down the trail. Hour till daylight. Shut off truck. Get out. Gear up. Super scary freaking shriek. Worked at bolt. Wait 5 minutes. Nothing. Still don't feel safe with an AUGHT6. Walk to killing spot. Feels watched. Sweet glorious daylight. Kill 2 deer. Found out later, fox call. This happened to me yesterday and the day before, close to OP story, but I didn't go investigate. Hang out window for a smoke. Halfway done when a bird screeches in a bush to the left of me. Flies out loud as freak. Hear something in bushes. Way too loud to be a small animal. Hear it moving about but can't see shit 'cause too dark. Still way too loud when walking. Suddenly nothing. Put out smoke and lock window. Next day have smoke again around same time. See really bright blur move to my right in neighbor's garden. Wasn't bright like a flash, more like just something that only showed light to me, it didn't illuminate anything around it. IGTFO. B17. Planning a bonfire with some friends, and some friends' friends. Bonfire set in the middle of an apartment complex. It's like a brick fire barbecue thing. Start the fire when the sun goes down. Cop who lives nearby comes and tells us to go home because we're making too much noise. Screw it, last week of summer, we're going to have this freaking bonfire. Move it to the woods. Familiar place, I've been there before. Good times begin. Friend Z is pretty drunk. Anon, I need to piss, come watch my back. What? Come on. Didn't really think, but kind of wanted to get away from the crowd for a bit. Social anxiety and shit, you know what's up. Friend leads me out pretty far, towards a creek. Takes like 5 freaking minutes to piss. Return to fire pit. Everyone's gone. Hear someone running a distance away. I yell hello. The running stops. Nope.jpg. Manage to make our way out of the woods. Get call from friend S right as we started to come out of the woods. Did you guys make it out okay? He sounds kind of scared. I say yeah, why didn't you tell us you guys were leaving? Apparently there was some crazy half-naked dude roaming the woods that tried to drink all their beer, and when he pulled a knife on them they all bolted. It was just scary as hell knowing that we were out there alone with him lurking the woods. Never go back to the woods at night ever again. I've got another story I'll green text for yet. Events here took place a little bits before crazy beer dude. B15. Be obnoxious adolescent stoner. Smoking a bowl in the woods with friends Z and S and GFA, at a different place as before, but same friends. Hugh dude look how high I am, was actually pretty high to be fair. See guy with a golf club in a small clearing behind us. Looks like he's looking for something. GF says her sister knows him or something. Sketched out the whole day. Could have been the weed, but something wasn't right about this dude. News report comes on the next day. Says a dude went missing, last seen near the apartment complex we were at that day. Ask GF to turn on the news. It was the golf club guy. A couple days later, his body was found about half a mile inwards from where we were. He had been beat to death with a golf club. What? They never found the guy who did it. Was it the crazy beer dude? I guess I'll never know. MFW, I still live about a quarter mile from those woods. And the last one I have of those woods. Be about 2 years ago. B19. Friend B and I are building a little shack in the woods, a fair bits away from where the murder happened, but still connected. Cutting down trees and shit, and putting up tarps and shit, and digging holes and shit. After about a month it's finally done. Only go there for campfires, and since B stills lives with his folks, all his friends and him always go there to drink/smoke weed or whatever teens are doing these days. Get a call from B one day. You aren't going to freaking believe this. Apparently he was porking his girl in the little shack we made, and when a crazy dude with a knife tried to assault his girlfriend, B, being a certified badass, quickly got his knife from his pants, and stabbed him. Cops do their job. He lives. Gets sent to prison sometime later. We all come to the conclusion that it was crazy beer dude. B ends up moving in with me. Every last week of summer break from school/college we go out to the pit and toast one off to crazy beer dude. Some nights we can still hear him, howling in the wind, brandishing his knife, and sipping on that oh so flavorful Heineken. Wife asks me to go camping. Hate the idea. She is excited though. Sure, why not? We drive to a secluded bit of land her grandparents own. Spend hours setting up the tent and campsite. We get ready. Go hiking. It rains a little. We get a little wet. We double back. Get back just as it gets dark. Make a fire. Wife is getting a little low energy. We eat and talk for a while. Decide to go to sleep. Inflatable mattress. Double sleeping bag. We get in together. She is shivering. Ask if she is okay. I'm fine. She keeps shivering. I don't feel good. You said you were fine. I don't want to ruin our trip. Oh boy, we get to go home. Feel her face. She's pretty hot. Well, it won't be any fun if you don't feel well. I think you may have a fever. I guess. Let's go home. Get up and get her to the car. Start it and turn on the heat. Start packing up our stuff. In the tent deflating the mattress. The horn beeps. I run out and over to the car. She says there was someone around our camp. Said they were crawling. As soon as she saw them move and was sure it was someone, she beeped the horn. Can tell she is upset. Don't believe her though. Tell her to relax and go back to packing. Gather everything outside the tent. Step back in to roll up the mattress. Hear her yell my name. Sounded like it came from the woods. Why is she outside the car? Here, help X, my leg is bleeding. Rush out. Glance at the car. She is asleep in the seat. Wave of fear. Hear something yell again. Help me. Still sounded like her but somewhat off. Too raspy and deep. Take down the tent. Just roll it up. Shove it in the car. Left a few things. Got the freak out of there. Driving a little fast. Wake wife up and have her put her seat belt on. Get home and ask her to tell me what she saw. She said it was white, thought it was a naked person crawling behind some trees. She saw them stand up against the tree and she beeped the horn and they dropped down and ran. Just woke up. I talked to my wife about it as we were going to bed last night. I had never told her what I heard and had just been dodging going camping again when she brought it up. I'm glad we talked though, because she was beginning to doubt what she had seen being sick that night. After telling her what I heard, she told me a pretty interesting story from when she was a kid staying at her grandparents'. I'll do my best to relay it. Shouldn't have slept on it. She was young. 10 or so. She was at her grandparents' house. House is on a hill about near where we camped. We saw it on our hike. Her brother, a cousin, and her were playing around the edge of the woods. Yelling and listening to their echoes. Hear a reply. Obviously not an echo. Sounded like their cousin's older sibling. Sibling wasn't there at the time. Sounded so much like them they were convinced they were just a little ways into the woods. Voices saying something like, "Guys, come here, I found something." They follow it into the woods. Keeps getting further away. Finally comes to a creek they know they're not allowed to be around/cross. Voices on the other side saying something, "Hurry, it's just over here." Her brother and cousin are walking the creek trying to find a place to cross. Wife, being a poosebag, runs back and tells on them. Grandpa spanks the three of them for even going that far into the woods unattended. They were upset they couldn't go play with her older cousin. She obviously never thought much of it being a kid at the time, but what happened to me certainly brought it back to mind. Actually makes me wonder if her grandparents knew something was up or simply didn't want them playing in the woods for obvious reasons. Also, I'm really curious about this Goatman/Skinwalker/Fleshgate stuff. I don't come to /X/ very often, so I'm not sure what it is, but if it relates in any way I'd like to find out more. I've posted this a few times, but living in northern Sask, Canada. Be about 14. We live way the freak up north. Be chillin' with friend on the farm. Decide to explore the forest towards the northeast. Never went too far into it 'cause bears and shit. Walk through for about 2 to 3 hours, token ganja and whatnot. We see a few rectangular buildings through the trees. Logging equipment around. There's 3 main buildings. All have boards on the doors except one. Go into not boarded building. Go right into a hallway. There's a lit candle at the end in the corner. Start shitting em. We still go on. There's an opening to our left. On the floor there's a hand sticking out from behind wall. Holy shit. JPG. We both freeze up. The hands start twitching and convulsing. We bolt the freak out of there. We hear a high-pitched blood-curdling scream behind us. Run for another 10 or so minutes. Never talk about it again. Lots of weird shit in those woods. I have more weirder ones if anyone wants to hear. Oh, the logging things were from French settlers from long-ass time ago. Alright, this one deals with freaking natives, OMG, and I mean like really natives. Be about 19. Still living in northern Sask. One night I'm sitting out on the porch with my drinking and shit. See someone driving a truck at the end of our property. We have no neighbors. WTF.jpg, we live like 40 kilometers from nearest house. They drive into woods on our dirt road. We get shotguns and shit. They don't approach us. They just go into woods. Dad tells me that's it's native shamans or a cult. Whatever, Dad, you're hammered. Next morning he tells me that they sometimes go in there for God knows what. Grandpa tells me he has seen them around a campfire and they used to steal our livestock. Next day I take the quad and a rifle to see what they were doing on our land. Follow the fresh tracks in mud for about 5 kilometers. Found where they stopped. Freaking blood all over everything. To my left was a couple dead chickens. And on a big rock in the center on the little clearing was one of our cows. It's been gutted. Intestines hanging out and shit. It's still alive, FFS. Shot in the head. There's other animal parts around and shit. Immediately called the cops. They tell me they know about this shit. To this day we still see them sometimes, and I have shot at their vehicles on multiple occasions now. I used to spend weeks during summer vacation at my grandparents' in Sugarloaf, CA. It's a small town outside of Big Bear in the mountains. It was a fairly tame place. Gray squirrels, chipmunks, blue jays, bobcats, and coyotes were the general denizens, along with packs of donkeys that wandered around up there. When I was in college, I decided to spend spring break with my grandfather. He had retired as a baker, and now spent most of his days doing chores around the house and fishing. I figured if I went up, helped him get some of his work around the house done, we could spend most of the trip at the lake catching trout and having some time together. For the most part, that's exactly what we did. I helped him sort his wood, do some work around the house that he needed help with, picked up the yard. Then we made for the lake and fished. One night, I decided I'd go to the Sugar Loafer, a bar up the road. I was 23, decided to have a beer or two, maybe shoot some pool. I walked there, as it was only a mile or so away. On the way there, I could hear a constant sound of something following after me. I thought nothing of it. Perhaps a curious dog or just my imagination. I got to the bar, had a few drinks, danced with a few girls, played my pool and some darts. It was a good night. But by the time I was ready to leave, the town outside had become eerily quiet. I exited the bar around 1 a.m. and started my walk home. I was a bit happy from my drinking, so I paid no mind to the quiet at first. The dark didn't bother me either. The sky was clear, the air was crisp. But then I started to hear the sound following me again. This time it wasn't masked by the sound of daily life in Sugarloaf. It was something on the edge of the trees across the road. I couldn't see anything, but I could hear the rustling of leaves. I quickened my pace, knowing it was only about 10 more minutes to my grandparents' house. As my pace quickened, the pace of my shadow quickened as well. I began to get nervous. That's when I saw the shadow of something man-sized dart from tree to tree. I paused a moment to stare at this abyss in the woods. Then I saw the abyss had eyes to stare back with. I could see 2 bright eyes look directly at me, locking with mine. I was filled with a terror, frozen in place. I could see it rise, getting taller, much taller. It then rose up and suddenly its eyes were obscured by branches. The frozen terror broke and I went at a full speed. I heard what sounded like a low growl as I bolted. I ran the entire way to my grandparents' house. I heard the leaves and sticks breaking as the thing pursued me. I got to the door, unlocked it as quick as I could, and slammed it shut behind me. I locked the door behind me, and sank to the floor. My grandparents had passed out in the room in the back, not even roused by me. I sat against the door panting heavily. I had hoped my ordeal was over. Then I heard a scratching and scrapping at the door. I could hear that strange growl on the other side. My shadow had followed me to the house. My shadow was waiting outside. And I was supposed to be here another 2 days. I remained sitting still at the door for what seemed like hours, until the sounds stopped outside, and I was sure whatever it was had left. I crawled to the guest room and laid in the bed silently the rest of the night. But my ordeal was not over. The next day I told my grandparents I thought something had followed me from the bar. They told me I was just paranoid and drunk. I went into town that day, trying to take my mind off the previous night. Maybe it was just a drunken delusion. I spent the day at the arcade in town, drove down to Stanfield Cut-Off and fished it for bass with my grandfather, a constant eye over my shoulder. After a while I had mostly gotten the thing out of my mind. We headed home with a few fish, happy to have gotten out. We cleaned them at home as usual. The sun setting, we headed inside to watch TV and rest from the day. As night fell, and my grandparents nodded off, I turned the TV to shows of my taste. Then I thought I saw something move outside the window. I stood up, walking to the window, thinking it was a raccoon or a coyote digging through the garbage. Then I saw it. The thing again, that shadow that followed me. It was searching about. I could see the thing slinking from place to place. I ducked to the ground. I got so quiet I could hear a low guttural moan outside. I wanted to close the blinds. But I was terrified to get up. Then I realized the eyes were locked onto me again, and my body tingled in terror again. It had found its way to the window behind the television. Its features masked behind the glow of the TV. All I could see were those horrible orbs staring at me. I felt as if it were staring into my very soul. It kept the gaze on me, and all I could do was stare back at it through the glass. It made this horrible moan. I thought it was going to burst through the glass at any moment. It kept making that horrible sound, each time it brought me closer to screaming bloody murder. I was saved by the neighbors, so to speak. As the thing sat behind the glass, masked by the light, I heard the car pull into the neighbor's derv. It broke its gaze, and the form of thing moved from the window. I got up, dropping the blinds on the window, pulling the drapes closed over every window. I ran into my grandparents' room. My grandfather was sitting there wide awake. He asked me if everything was locked up. I told him it was. He asked me if all the blinds were closed. I told him I just did. He got up, came into the living room and sat down across from me. He spoke in a hushed whisper. "You better go home tomorrow." After that he gestured me into the guest room. As we got to the room, we both saw the form pass by the kitchen window. My grandfather whispered to me again. "Go lay down, don't move, don't make a sound." I didn't question him. I went to bed, and laid in terror until dawn. In the morning, my grandparents were very solemn. Neither would say anything to me about what had happened. They acted as if nothing had happened. I caught a nap, packed my things, and they saw me off. As I drove down the street, I passed by the edge of the thicker forest. In it I saw something melt into the trees. I haven't gone back since. My grandfather ended up moving down the hill some years later after my grandmother's death. He told me one day, when we were sitting together, "Boy, there's things in those hills that people don't want you to know about. There's things that young folk don't understand up there." I nodded to him. "Just remember to never look at them kinds of things. They don't like it. They don't want to be seen." He has since passed away, and I still haven't returned to Sugarloaf. But we'll never forget those horrible eyes, staring in the dark. B14. Visiting uncle in Flagstaff, AZ. Be outside, playing the woods with cousin. Cousin sees me start heading for a cave in the rocks. We don't go there. Why? 'Cause there's dead things in there. Don't believe, go in anyway. Mouth of the cave is a bunch of small animal bones. Go in a little farther, can't see much. Hear bones crunch and a slurp from deep inside. Two big eyes look at me and hear a screech. Run like hell. I got one. Be last week. Boar hunting INNAWOODS with a bro. It starts getting dark. Set up camp, call it a night. Later in the night. Woken up by some rustling outside the tent. Creep out of the tent, hit with a sudden powerful stench. It's coming from every direction. Grab my loaded nugget, affix bayonet, tromp forth with nose plugged. Feel my feet starting to sink into the ground deeper with each step. I think I'm getting into some marshes. Suddenly hear a voice behind me. This is my swamp boy, and those boars are mine too. I don't even have time to turn around before I'm forced onto a tree and my pants are ripped clean off. You've overstepped your boundaries, now it's time for some Shreksual punishment. Feel a sharp pain in my ass. Faint almost immediately from pain. B8 or 9. In Lansing, MI, visiting family. Playing in the woods with cousin. Find awesome down tree over creek. Running across it etc. Kid shit. Hear howling coming from field across from forest we're in. Cousin said it's from the people's dogs living across the field. Howls get louder. Cousin insisting it's nothing, we walk back to the house. Along the way my uncle finds us, he's sweating and red, been jogging/exercising. Where's your cousin Anon? Look behind me, nobody's there. Swear to God, we walked for only 3 minutes, and I know he was with me the entire time. We go looking for him. Old man walks up to us. Y'all best be getting out of these parts. Uncles looks puzzled, asks why. There's some mutts running loose, owners said some crazy kids took 'em. Take no mind to the old guy, walk off his property and keep searching. Find cousin laying down in creek where we were playing. Unconscious. Hear loud freaking howling, hurt my ears. Uncle grabs me and him, throws over shoulders, and bullets back to house. Could hear dogs panting, started crying. I looked over his shoulder and saw these giant, bear-looking dogs chasing my uncle. They were slow for some reason, couldn't catch up. Make it back to house, uncle is crying, holding us and praying for dear life etc. etc. Later that night, in bed, cousin doing better, says he just fainted while we were walking, no idea how he ended up in creek. Nighttime now, almost asleep. Hear tapping on window. Look outside, see skinny white person looking right at me, had a plague doctor mask on. I scream at the top of my lungs, he just stands there. Grandfather and uncle burst in, he's still standing there looking at me. We all stare at him, uncle grabs pistol in other room. Goes outside, shoots guy. Turns out this was the guy who took the dogs from some dude down the road who took care of them. Dude was hopped on some shit, dogs dead from dehydration, explains why they chased us. I've got two, one isn't a forest story. About 12 with friends same age. Exploring through my woods, using machete to freak trees up and shit. Be about 300 yards into woods. Find a little clearing with tons of bones. Feel freaked out. See really old stuffed animals in a pile near all the bones. Feel really freaked out. Get back home quickly. Be 13. I sleep with absolutely no lights in the rooms, alarm clock face covered too. Window still leaks in moonlight around blinds, enough to make out outlines. Have a jacket hung up on a chair in my room that day. Wake up around 3 a.m. Feel a little anxious for some reason. Look over at the jacket. Its outline is slowly growing taller. Full panic in my mind. It looks like it's getting closer to my bed, it's about the height of a person now. Nope, the freak out. Vault out of bed and run to parents' room. Scare the shit out of them. After they calm down and I tell them why I ran in there, they don't believe me. Go into my room and there's nothing there. Jacket is on the floor now. Sleep in my parents' bed for the first time in years. Lay awake in my bed for the next few weeks, unable to get to sleep but too scared to open my eyes. Wish I was good at green text. I used to be full-on Mormon. In the 1990s, we had extended family who lived in a big Mormon ranch/compound down in actual Mexico. The house we stayed at was at the outer edge of the compound. One night I woke up to the sound of my uncle's dogs barking. I turned the light on next to the bed, and leaned up to look out the window. Nothing, just the glare of the glass. Then I clicked the lamp off, thinking it was just some coyote or something. Then I saw it. There was a man just standing in the moonlight about 200 yards from the house. Back then, this was just one of the first signs of things to come in Mexico. Be a teen. Be camping in the woods with two friends. 2 tents, 3 guys. Set up rotations so each guy gets one night of privacy. Night 2, Dave has privacy, Sean and I are in second tent. Sean fell asleep a while ago. Can't sleep, but laying there with eyes closed, trying. Hear heavy ass breathing. Little later, breathing continues. Scratching starts by the tent. Open eyes. Sean is awake, crouched and tense, starting at screen tent window over my head. Open my mouth to speak. Sean signals me for silence. Turn head. See tent start to bulge inward as it's prodded from outside. Heavy breathing this whole time, neither me nor Sean. Phone vibrates. Heavy breathing pauses. Incoming call, Dave. Decline call, set to full silent, text Dave, what the F dude, not funny. Breathing starts again. Reply, tell Sean to stop breathing outside my tent. Can't sleep. Sean's still right by me. Nope.jpg. Reply, he's right here, man. Hear from direction of other tent, bullshit. Tent effing explodes into activity as breathing thing effing tackles it. Hear angry shouts from Dave's tent, other noises that don't sound like anything I've heard, animal or human. Tangled in tent wreckage like dumbass. Pull self out part way, see Sean running into the woods with his knife in his hand. See Dave struggling with something. Untangle, run to help Dave. Black, vaguely humanoid shape wallops Dave and he goes limp. Battle cry, read, girl a scream, at thing. Thing looks at me with eyes the size of my freaking spread hands. Thing bolts on all fours. Check on Dave. Out cold, but breathing. Drag him over to fire. Get fire nice and big. Wait, worried for Sean. No idea how much time passes, phone's out in the dark with the tent wreckage and I don't do watches. Sean eventually comes back. Left arm covered in blood, knife gone. Holy shit. Are you okay? Yeah. What the hell were those things? Bears. The hell they were. Sean glares bloody effing murder at me. They were. Goddamn. Bears. Quiet. Clean Sean's arm with some water, injury was too small for so much blood. Dave wakes. Go home as soon as we have enough light to reach the truck. Never been camping since. Fellow Osfug. I was pretty tempted by this story. Bit of a letdown. Also, ain't no spooky shit in Straya. Brr. I've got 2 stories. They confuse me, because I don't believe in anything paranormal, really. They're just odd. B20-ish. Live in rural town near Vic/NSW border. Girlfriend at the time lived with parents on cattle farm about 20 kilometers away. Most direct route to drive is a shitty road that cuts through wetlands, constant fog that hovers about a foot off the road in the cold months. Visit most nights. Know the area. Shitty conditions. Ain't no thing. Driving home one night at around 1-ish in the morning. Pitch black. Driving very slow, only around 20 kilometers per hour, through the worst 2 or 3 bends with high beams on. Navigating by the reflector posts on the sides of the road, as ever-present spooky fogs at bonnet level. There's something. He's crazy to be on a bike out here. Dip headlights. Bit far away to be a guy on a bike. Hell, don't cross, are you stupid? Phew, that's big. Catch a brief sight out the driver's window of I don't know what. See in the rearview mirror, a bloke on a bike. Balancing a refrigerator on his head, draped in camouflage netting. That's my rational explanation. The second odd thing happened on that same former girlfriend's parents' property. It was a cattle farm, right? So it was a big piece of land, and it was right up on top of the highest hill in the area. There were a few neighbors around who also had cattle, and because of where this house was located up on this big hill, you could sit out on the porch late at night and see the lights of the neighboring houses in the distance and cars driving along the highway. Every now and then, on a really dark night, I would see red lights swooping around the paddocks way down the hill. Red lights swooping around the paddocks. Red spotlights, on the back of utes, driven by idiots that would come out in the middle of the night to shoot kangaroos and foxes and whatnot. Whenever I'd be sitting out the front drinking with old Phil, her dad, he'd be straight on the phone, calling the neighbors who'd chase them off. You don't shoot around livestock, you know. So. Regular postponing sneaky cigarette on porch. 2 to 3 a.m. Foggy again. Red lights flickering down the hill. Not telling Phil. It's late/early, and you know I'm porking your daughter, but not going to make it obvious. Another ute with a spotlight a few hundred meters north. Northerly spotlight turns white. The first light starts strobing red and blue. Her coppers, they got you. White spotlight turns into a straight white line back to the flashing red and blue one. Black for a few seconds. Red and blue flashing light takes off east at ground level, trees and terrain be damned. 1, 2, 3, it's over the horizon. I don't have a rational explanation for that one. Space cunts be shootin' our roos, I doesn't quite cut it. I've seen the Min lights before which have a scientific explanation, but this was just all kinds of strange. B12. On holiday way up north in Finnish Lapland. Early spring comes, so no sun even in the daytime. Be adventuring around along a snowmobile track leading from our cottage to who knows where. As long as you stay on it, you can go as far as you like. Wise advice for a 12-year-old, Pops. Walk along until night falls. Pitch freaking black, snow-covered fir trees all around like it's people standing motionless, staring at you, pic related. Start to hear crying. Actual, little baby crying, with sobs and all. Nope. The crying rises to a wail, turns into a full-on female scream for 2 seconds, then back to sobbing and little baby crying. Crying starts to approach. Too scared to move or look around to find the silhouette of whoever is crying among the trees. Crouch there shitting your pants for what feels like hours, slowly freezing your ass. Crying continues all the while, sometimes close by, sometimes farther away in the woods. While crouching, remember reading about Liakias in some old book on old Finnish folklore. They're the souls of the unwanted babies whose mothers had them in the woods and either left them there to die or murdered them outright. They're left to forever cry in the woods and tempt unsuspecting people into getting lost. Eventually realize you'll soon be too frozen to make your way back to the cottage at all, so hopeless turned into panicked shambling, following the snowmobile track, not looking up. Crying freaking follows me. Get to cottage, don't tell anyone. Eventually calm down, go upstairs to go to sleep. Hear the creature start crying again outside beneath your window. Turns out, of course, it was a fox calling in early spring heat, and one of the bastard ones who've learned to follow people in hopes of scraps because of stupid tourists. Thank you, fox, for my still continuing fear of starting to hear crying whenever I'm alone in the woods. Neat. Pick up friend, drive around all night on California back roads. Head into hills, forest road. Never knew this was here. Path very curvy, trees thicken. Slow down. Friend says I just saw a guy in the woods. It was probably just a weird-looking tree. He turns off music, looks intently out windows and windshield. What's up? I glimpse 3 people standing in the trees by the road. WTF. He says we've passed quite a few strange-looking people in / near the trees, watching us pass. No campgrounds around, all pitch black. See another trio staring. Gun it. Take a different road home. This was somewhere between Temecula and Escondido, it was years ago so I can't remember the road. Disclaimer. Following story is very graphic. I am not kidding. Skip to the next story on the bar below if you easily get nightmares. Posting from phone so no green text. South African bro here, just your average white guy, decide to go camping in a woods. Well, not really woods but in a thick bush. Get lost. Really freaking lost. Got a panga, basically a machete but thinner and 4 foot long, no signal. Battery dead. Darkness falling. Be winter so at 6, got no light. Start panicking looking for a trail. Hear bush baby cries, scary as shit. And screams. Human screams. Come across a shack. And sneak up. Peer inside, some chanting Sangoma, witch doctor, doing stuff, leaning over a small baby's corpse. Small white blonde girl. No more than 3. Beheaded. Saw him cut open her womb and scoop out her underdeveloped lady bits and put it in a boiling pot. Snuck up, swung and sunk the panga into his neck, then just bolted, ran in one direction, eventually got picked up by a farmer asking how the hell I got onto his farm. Be me at 13. Edgy as hell with my best friend. Get mad at my parents. Go over to friends, go into the woods next to her house. Walk around me complaining. Stumble upon a campsite thing. Never been to these part of the woods. See a bloodied machete. Cooler right next to it. WTF freaking nope. Stay at the campsite looking around. Wild looking hick appears out of nowhere. Da feck you derin in mer campsite leave right now ya hear? Being edgy little bastard reply with. Make us. Hick gets pissed and says with a creepy smile, have you looked in my cooler yet? You see dat der blood on dat blade? You know how it got on der? Nope, the freak out of the woods hear the hick laughing. For about 3 weeks afterward we couldn't sleep alone, afraid that the hick would come and get us. Pretty sure the hick bastard just said the whole machete and cooler thing to creep us out and make us leave, which worked, but still freaked the hell out of me and my friend. My father told me a story once. I'll never forget it, for a few reasons. I think it's the first story he ever told me, as a child. It's also the story of how my grandfather died. But honestly, that isn't the reason. You hear stories on TV, or sometimes you overhear something in a public place. People talk about ghosts and aliens, and you think to yourself that ain't real. They're making it up, or they're mistaken, or they're crazy or something like that. You just can't believe it. Until something happens. Something that brings it all together, connects the dots in a way you didn't think of before. Maybe it happens to you, maybe you hear the same story again and again, happening to different people. It doesn't take long for the world to become a lot bigger than you thought it was. As I said, this is a story my father told me, but I never believed it, even though he swore up and down it was true. It wasn't until I started clicking around the internet I started to believe. I started to hear other stories just like the one my father told me. It didn't take me long to believe in the Rake. That's not what my father called it, of course. He's never used the internet in his life, he wouldn't know what the consensus has taken to naming it. When he chose to call it something other than it or that thing, he called it Skinwalker after an old Cherokee tale his grandfather told him. But I'll tell you the story, the way he told it to me. We were out hunting one night, he'd tell me. Coyotes. We'd kill 'em for $50 a skin. They lived on a dairy farm, in Ohio. They'd kill calves sometimes. We'd do it every night, because we needed the money. Sometimes, while we were out, we'd come on a deer, and kill it. Our landlord didn't mind, and it could feed our family for a few nights and save us some money. Suddenly, blood, everywhere. Splattered on the trees, in the grass, in the creek, everywhere. At first, we figured it was a pack of coyotes. We'd seen it sometimes. They can scavenge and start hunting deer or cattle. The worst was when they breed with feral dogs. But this wasn't like that. See, when a pack of dogs, or wolves, or coyotes attack something, they do it right. They'll pick off one that's weak, or sick, or old, or just small. They'll hunt it, draw it into a corner, some place it can't get out of, and they'll run it right to the biggest one, the alpha. And that deer will never see that alpha. It might hear it, but it won't see it. It'll just notice that its throat is gone, and then it'll drop dead. It's quick, it's clean. That wasn't what happened here. Something had run up on a den of deer. Coyotes won't attack a den, wolves neither, because they'd get too much of a fight. There were three, I think, 3 bodies. Just torn apart. You'd see a head here, a leg here, a torso there. Predators don't do that. They don't leave behind scraps. What had done this hadn't done it for food. It had done it for fun. But we didn't know that. We saw a bunch of carcasses and we think it's something we gotta take care of. I remember my dad telling me to go home. He thought it was a pack of feral dogs. But I wasn't leaving him, and I damn sure wasn't walking through 2 miles of woods alone, with nothing but a .22 and a pocket knife. He was only 13 at the time, so a .22 rifle was about the only gun he could reliably use. Dad had the shotgun, and I wasn't going anywhere without it. It took me a while to convince him, but finally we began tracking whatever did that. It wasn't hard, either, we just followed the blood. Either that thing bleed a deer before it got away, or it dragged one for a mile. I don't know. I know that I'd never seen my dad scared before that night. We started hearing noises. I've been in a lot of woods, in my life, I've been all over the world, and ain't never heard noises like I heard that night. I heard things screaming. Heard deer and fox and rabbits and raccoons and birds, just scared. Keep in mind, this is maybe 12 or 1 o'clock. Except the fox and some birds, nothing was supposed to even be awake. But they weren't just awake, they were moving. I saw flocks of birds that night fly straight into trees just trying to get out of there. We came up on a pack of coyotes, nearly shot a couple thinking it was what we were looking for, but then we saw they were running towards us. They ran right past us, didn't even notice. Then some deer did the same. Then some rabbits, squirrels, foxes, even a couple wild hogs. These things were supposed to be eating each other, and the only thing they cared about was getting out of there. We should have put it together. That maybe whatever we were tracking, it wasn't something we were supposed to see, and it wasn't something we could kill. I don't know why we didn't just go home. I guess we were curious. I think that was my dad's nature, to go toward trouble, to fight. And knowing what I knew about what my father did during the war, my nature was to stay close to him. We finally get into an open valley. It was normally a soy field, but it wasn't in season, so it was just flat dirt. We saw the tracks, then. A lot of the animals fleeing the forest had paved over the land. But where that deer blood was, nothing had taken a single step. Like they were leaving it for us to find. The tracks were shallow. Whatever it was couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, but that didn't mean much. A bobcat weighing 40 pounds wet nearly tore out my damn throat, once. All that means is that it's quick and hard to hit. So we follow the tracks, and it doesn't take us long to find where it is. There's this old schoolhouse that sits on the top of a hill. Half of it had been ripped out by a tornado, but nobody lived there, not for a long time. We caught homeless people in there, sometimes, or druggies looking for a safe place to shoot up. We figured maybe that was it. Maybe it was some sick kid riding a high. But we didn't think that for long. We get within 50 yards, and we hear this noise. A screeching kinda sound. It was sort of made up of 2 different sounds. One was a high-pitched screech, another was a low-pitched growl. It was making both, at the same time. We get within 20 yards, and we hear this sound. I can remember thinking that it sounded like paper being torn apart, while someone was swinging water in a bucket, back and forth. Dad looks at me, kneels down, and whispers. I gotta stay behind him, 'cause we're about to corner him. Any animal will fight when it's cornered, especially when it's a predator. But we can tell by the tracks that it's just one. He tells me it's probably a single, feral dog, probably rabid. The plan is to sneak up on it while it's eating, shoot it, and then keep shooting it till it don't move anymore, then slit its throat. And if it gets to Dad, it's my job to shoot it or stab it to get it off him. So he walks up, and I'm right behind him, just a tad to his side, so I can see what it is. I wish to this day I hadn't. It was leaning over a carcass, tears off its flesh, and throws what it doesn't nibble at aside. There's blood all over the brick, glistening in the moonlight. It's pale white. Human looking, but not quite human. It had arms and legs like a human, but it sat like a monkey, hunched over. And its hands weren't normal, it had long fingers with claws at the end. So we see that, and my dad hesitates. He wasn't about to fire on a person. So he clears his throat, to try get it to turn around. I swear to God, all the noise just ceased. I ain't ever heard true silence before that, and not after it. But for 2 seconds, nothing made any noise. Which made it all the louder when it turned around, made this shrill cry, and jumped on Dad. He got a shot off. I think he missed. If he hit the thing, it didn't mind. But it was on him, tears parts of him off. I start shooting it with the .22, point blank, but it barely bled the thing. I got off 5 rounds, and then I started hitting it with the gun butt. But it wasn't budging. It didn't even register that I was there. It's clawing at my dad, taking off bits of his flesh. It starts on his torso, ripping off the skin, his tit, then it moves up. It tore off his throat, it tore off his nose, his eyes, it scalped him. Then it started digging in, ripped off the bottom half of his jaw, the little bones and that tube in your neck, then his ribs. I don't exactly remember what happened, but somehow, my dad's knife ends up in this thing's shoulder, and my dad ends up on my back. I'm running, and by God I'm running faster than I'd ever run before or after. And it's following me. I end up back in the woods, opposite the ones we've been in. I'm heading towards my landlord's house, 'cause it's half a mile away. I can hear this thing screeching and moaning. I hear these tree branches crack and get thrown around. It sounds like someone's taking an axe to every single tree I pass. It's cracking so loud and often, but I just ain't looking back. Finally, I trip into gravel. I look up and there's my landlord and bunch of his buddies, drinking around a campfire. I scream and I cry, and they come over. I'm telling them to call an ambulance, and he looks at me, and I'll never forget what he said. "What is that on your back?" he asked me. Just as he said it, he saw one of those god-awful flannel shirts my dad wore everywhere. It was what was left of my dad. Most of his head, his torso, but nothing after the waist. Suddenly we hear it. Screeching. He grabs me, my dad gets thrown on the ground. I'm fighting him, crying, 'cause I think we can still save him, somehow, but my dad had been gone for I ever picked him up. He has to pick me up and throw me inside before I come with him. He and his buddies, we're all inside, and they're locking doors, and getting guns. The landlord's asking me what happened. What happened, but I just don't know what to tell him. He pieced enough of it all together to understand that there was something dangerous there. All the lights in the house are on, and someone calls the cops. They'll be there, but in 15 minutes. We look outside, and see it walk in front of the fire they'd made. Don't know what it is, one of 'em says it looks like an ape. Suddenly, something goes through the window. We shoot at it, but ain't the thing. It's my landlord's dog. Just the body, though. Not his head or legs. We start pushing things in front of doors and windows, when we hear something the garage. I remember one of his friends saying that the doors were open. We hear metal and glass just get ripped apart. We put a couch and a TV in front of the door to the garage. It banged around some more, but then it got quiet. Not silent, like it was before. We could hear it move around some, and the guys were talking, making sure the guns were ready. Someone hands me a pistol. No sooner did I cock the hammer back did we hear something shatter upstairs. Then we heard it screech again. Except now it was louder, and it didn't echo and fade out. Because it was inside. We all rushed to the one door leading upstairs, and we got to it just as that thing did. It opened it just a bit, and 4 or 5 men just slammed into it. It got its hand through. Someone with a shotgun took care of that. Put the barrel right up to its wrist and pulled the trigger. Cut its hand off, clean. That only pissed it off, though. It started pushing on that door, clawing. We were on one side, pushing as best we could, and it was on the other, doing the same. That wood just wasn't going to hold, so someone tells us to keep our heads down. Suddenly the top half of the door is just gone, my ears are ringing, and there are splinters everywhere. 2 or 3 of them just unloaded on the top of that door. I don't really know where it went after that. The police got there. I was still glued to that door, what was left of it. The sun was up before they got me off it. They put me in a hospital for a while. A lot of people talked to me, but I didn't talk back, not for a long time. When I got back home, I got a job for the landlord, working on the farm. We didn't talk much, not about the thing. But, I signed up for the army when I was 19, and he sat me down to drink some scotch as a send-off. I asked him, right away, what the police told him. The story they went with was a wild animal, probably a wolf, or maybe a bear that had migrated north. I asked him how they could say that when they had the hand. He looks at me, stunned. He tells me that hand never made it back to the station. The cop who had it in his car wrecked, drove into a tree, died on impact. The hand was never found, probably taken away by an animal. The cops, when they would acknowledge the hand existed at all, said it was simply the paw of a bear that looked like a human hand. I never talked to the landlord again. He went missing when I was in basic. Never found him. They said he owed some people some money and just ran away, but I don't think it's that simple. I never went back to those woods. I wouldn't even if I had the whole goddamn US Army at my back. But that was a lie. When my mother died, I don't think my father felt he had anything left, and that he might as well settle old scores. He went to those woods. He never came back. FBI was called, they did a show for everyone involved, but I knew they weren't really looking. I had to get one drunk and slip him a few 50s before he finally told me that they get a few calls about those woods every year, about someone up and vanishing. But that was all he wanted to tell me. Before he got up and left with the rest of his team, he wrote the Rake onto a napkin. I didn't know what I meant until I searched for it on the internet. Honestly, I would have rather not known. My dad claims to have hit some kind of monster with his car. He was in his early 20s and lived on his parents' farm in rural Australia in the 1970s. Him and his brother were driving back to the property late at night on a dirt road through a wooded area, and he claims a 3 meters tall skinny creature that was completely white and humanoid looking, sprinted out of the trees impossibly fast towards them and hit their bonnet and went over their car. He put emphasis that it was completely unnaturally white, like not skin white but white paint white. They just freaking gunned it and got out of there as fast as they could and didn't look back. they get back to the farm and their bonnet is completely messed up and crushed in and covered in blood. They went back with their dad in the morning with a rifle and there was blood streaked down the road but no body. He swore on his life this happened until the day he died, and he was a pretty smart and reasonable dude. I have to believe him. I have a few true stories actually, none of them paranormal, I think, but still creepy. When my great-grandma was moving into my grandmother's house, she had dementia, and all that, we had to go to her house and clean it out. I was about 14 at the time, and my cousin who was about 18 was there with us helping. He and I got bored, so we told my grandpa we were going to go explore. My great-grandma lived on the outskirts of a very small, very poor, very crime-ridden town. In hindsight, us going out running around was probably really dangerous, but where the town ended, the thick trees, abandoned trailers, and homes began. I picked up a stick. My cousin, however, got the better end of the deal since he got to carry the BB gun. I'm older, so I get to have it. You'll probably shoot me or yourself, he said. I really didn't care. When I was 14 I played way too many RPGs and thought the sword I had was way better. It was hot as hell, there were grasshoppers bigger than my head darting through the tall grass, that filled in the small gaps between the trees, and my cousin was blurting out random hip-hop verses. He was pretty wiggery, but still a pretty cool guy. We made our way towards a truck that was broken down in the clearing about a fourth of a mile from the house. We, of course, smashed every smashable thing on that thing. Windows, mirrors, the rusted-out bumpers, all of it. It didn't belong to anyone, so no harm was really done to anyone but ourselves. My cousin managed to slice his hand open. So, after smashing up the truck we walked a little further and found a very small, half-burned down house. Our grandmother had told us about it. Apparently it was a meth lab gone wrong or something. So, of course, into the meth lab we went. It was almost surreal. One half of the house was nearly perfect. Pictures of kids on the wall, a fridge, a TV in front of a chair. But to the other side, trees were growing into the house. Charred wood jutted out between tall grass and branches. We, of course, made sure the normal part of the house was made even by breaking all the mirrors and pictures and the TV. Oh, the TV was the best. My cousin shot the glass out and it exploded. Well, as we were laughing our asses off I glanced out the burnt outside of the house, and saw a man in army fatigues, a floppy straw farmer's hat and with a white beard that covered his chest. My cousin waved, and the guy just walked off. We noticed behind where he was standing was a trailer with an open door. Probably his, my cousin whispered. Let's go look inside. Off in. Ment kicked it in. As he kicked the door in we notice a bunch of lumps in the floor, and on nasty couches in the trailer. The lumps start moving. One of them sits up. I notice a bunch of used syringes scattered about the floor. Holy shit hell, my cousin shoots the BB gun off in the general direction of the 6 or 7 hungover/high homeless men. We then ran as hard as we could, screaming of course, the entire mile or so back to my great-grandma's house. Getting whipped by tree branches and stepping on random sharp God knows what the whole way back. So we both come stumbling into the garage screaming about savage hobos, covered in sticks, leaves, and cuts. Be 7th grade me. Weekend field trip to a summer camp. Note, there is nothing strikingly spoopy, just a normal camp. Asleep in cabin one night with around 7 other people. My bed is right next to the window. Hear footsteps in woods. Figure it's counselors patrolling grounds to make sure kids haven't snuck out. Hear it again. Look out window, noise stops. It's pure dense freaking woods, why would they patrol back there? Lay back down. Footsteps more cautious this time, getting closer to my window. Shoot up and look out window, footsteps stop completely. Drift off after being creeped out for about an hour. The woods behind my cabin looked somewhat like they do in the image, just darker with more moonlight. Hey/X/, I live up in northern Canada, Labrador City to be exact. A cousin of mine came back home a week ago nearly frozen to death after going into the woods on his snowmobile to hunt rabbits. He came back, without his snowmobile, or backpack, only the soaked clothes on his body, limping at the edge of the highway. He said that he was out in the middle of the forest following a rabbit's tracks when he saw human tracks. He left his snowmobile half a kilometer back so he can follow this rabbit quietly. When he saw the human tracks he assumed it was another hunter, and decided to turn around back to his snowmobile and let the other hunter take the kill. When he got back to the area where he left his snowmobile, it was gone, along with most of his random shit. He looked around and saw pic related, he took it himself with his cell phone, staring at him. He told us the thing staring at him, which he calls Forest Man, took off into the forests. So my uncle went on a day-long trek back home. It's a miracle he's alive. He felt that he was being watched the whole time, and heard noises and snow crunching under footsteps in the forests around him. Again, pic related, he took it with his cell phone. I'm not sure if he made it up or not, but it's definitely true that he was missing for a day or two. And before people ask why he couldn't have just called for help on his cell phone, we get terrible cell phone coverage up here. You have to be in a clearing, in town, or on a road or something to get it to work. Hello/X/. Someone here might know something about an entity I saw in a forest near my house. It was a white, hazy-looking figure resembling an incomplete cloaked human form. It appeared from nowhere, floated a foot or so into one direction and disappeared. Worth noting is also that birds near me started singing loudly when it appeared, fell silent as it vanished and started singing in other parts of the forest farther from me, as if the entity was moving there. The forest was a small one in a suburban area, if that makes any difference. Has anyone else come into contact with something like this before? It's a effing ghost, what did you expect? My school is located in a rural area with a very limited amount of houses, and a generously big forest located nearby. During my day at school, we have a lengthy 1 hour and 30-minute lunch. After finishing our food, my 3 buddies and I either stay inside the school, head to the back of the school and hang around outdoors, or we would head to the nearby forest. We spent most of our free lunch time in the forest nearby. The forest for a modest majority was laid out with paths, large forest, easy to get lost. It's common for people to walk through the forest, so we'd more than often go off trail to hang out. Lunches in the forest were always normal. We would on a usual occasion bring raw meat in to cook up with a fire which we'd spend time lighting ourselves with dead leaves, branches, etc. 2 weeks ago, 2 of my friends were not around during lunch, one was ill, the other had a rugby game. This wasn't much of a problem as my remaining friend and I both got along exceptionally well. During the respective lunch, my friend and I decided to make a fire and hang around a bit in the forest. As we walked into the forest, my friend insisted to go off trail than we usually ever would. Seemed harmless enough, we know the forest pretty well, so why not? As we went off trail, the ground was slowly beginning to go uphill. My cardio is terrible, so I honestly didn't appreciate this. We reached the top of the hill and found a good-sized patch of rock and dead grass to start a fire on. Just as we set out to go find fire-starting materials and parted ways, I caught a young, or perhaps a woman's, voice say something inaudible. I darted my eyes to my friend who was some 4 to 5 feet from me and asked if he heard it. He looked confused at first. While we were both looking at each other still, I heard the girl's voice again. It sounded innocent and had a soft echo to it. If I were to guess, the voice was echoing from about 300 feet away. Pick related, path to top. Honey. Still looking at my friend in anticipation, both of our eyes both widened. He heard it this time. About 8 seconds later, the voice spoke again. Honey. This time, the voice seemed to have gotten closer. 6 seconds later, the voice spoke again. Honey. Again, the voice seemed to have gotten closer. I signaled my friend to GTFO, though he seemed to have wanted to stick around. I didn't. I shook my head at him, both of us too scared to speak, then bolted down the off-trail path we had beat in. My friend quickly followed. I still had my school bag on me, which has a laptop and heavy books in it. And to add on to that, the bag was loosely strapped, so running was definitely a challenge. I almost tripped a couple of times. As we were running out off the off-trail path and back onto the trail, I could have sworn I heard a faint humming from the same voice, though it was probably my head messing with me in the heat of the moment. We were fairly deep into the forest, but around 14 minutes of hard running later, we both got out of the forest and have sworn not to speak of what happened in the forest to anyone in the school. Even after my 2 friends got back, we didn't speak of it and just subtly told them to refrain from the forest. I went in there by myself 3 days later armed with a knife to check the area out and grab pictures of curiosity and did not hear anything. Though on the way out, did hear the same humming I did the day we were running. Brain messing with me? Hopefully. Haven't been in the forest since. Pick related, exact spot we heard the voice from. Fairies/sprites/gnomes/forest stuff general. Got any stories? /x/? I'll be bumping this thread with some. Mid-1940s, Catskill Mountains, New York. There was a family gathering at a relative's home in the woods of the Catskills. The adults were mainly inside while the children were playing outdoors. While the others did whatever they were doing, Jill, a little girl of 5, became fascinated with the flutterbies and no one noticed her chasing after them into the woods. Ultimately, the adults checked back in to find that she was lost. Many people searched many hours in vain and dusk was coming, bringing a great deal of despair with it. Then, suddenly, a besmudged Jill came running happily out of the woods unharmed. What had happened? Once Jill had followed the flutterbies for a while, she lost them and realized that she was lost herself. She tried to find her way back to her aunt's house, but only got deeper into the forest. She thought she heard someone calling for her, but it was too far away, and she couldn't get a direction on it. Finally she came into a small clearing. Feeling very tired, she took a candy bar from her pocket, sat on an old dead tree and ate a little. She felt lonely and started to cry. She looked up and saw standing at the edge of her clearing 2 small living dolls with silvery hair to their shoulders. They were dressed in shiny green clothes and had caps. She offered them some of her candy bar, but they didn't respond. Beginning to cry, then she asked them if they knew the way to her aunt's house. They nodded and motioned for her to follow. As dusk came on and the forest darkened, the little dolls became accompanied by small balls of blinking colored light, which illuminated the way. They all seemed to be going faster and faster as they went, and Jill was surprised at how fast she was moving. She said, like a sped-up movie. The dolls then abruptly stopped and pointed to the aunt's house. Jill happily turned to thank them, but they were gone. And she ran to embrace her parents. 1929, Lackawack, New York. A man was walking the mile or so from his friend's house on a dirt road running through the woods. There was an unusual silence to everything, an uncanniness which made the woods seem to be closing in around him. There was a weird light off the road, pulsing on the ground among the trees. Too curious to just walk on, he carefully left the road and negotiated the tangle of plants between him and the light. On the ground was a dome of light 4 feet in diameter and 1.5 feet high. It was yellow-green. He wondered if it could be some weird fungus effect, and went closer, reaching below the illumination to feel the ground. Nothing unusual. The dome suddenly brightened greatly, scaring him into cover. Within the area of the dome, 2 beings slowly materialized. They were 1 foot high. They stepped out, looking like classic little people of the folktales. They stared in his direction, unnerved him, and he stumbled backwards with a crash. Quickly the little folk jumped back into the glow dome and everything vanished. The witness was left trying to relax and collect himself. Upon examining the spot the next day, nothing was disturbed at the spot of the glow. 1977, Catskill Mountains, New York. A hiker/hunter had spent many hours in these woods. He knew them well, he thought. About 100 yards into the forest that summer's day, things began to get strange. For a few seconds, while passing a large rock formation, he felt a tingling go through his whole body. Soon after he began noticing that the environment had changed. The previously overcast sky was now sunny clear. It seemed to be tinged with green rather than just blue. The country was now more open than it should have been. Certain plants grew which shouldn't have been there, large granite outcroppings that were not part of his hiking areas. There was a narrow canyon cutting into those cliffs. Convinced that he had somehow gotten completely lost, he trudged up the canyon. Then he heard pretty music ahead. Peeking around, he saw 4 little men sitting on boulders by a waterfall, playing flutes. Another one gathered water from the fall. Our hiker had a camera, which almost never happens, and remembered to use it, which is 1 in a million. The water gatherer returned, the little folk got up, and moved off further up the canyon. Our hiker retreated the way he came with his pictures. Wandering about for around an hour, he suddenly spotted his car. Another tingling then hit him, and turning, the strange environment was gone. The tint of the sky was back to normal, and overcast again. His watch said that 30 minutes had passed, but he felt that it was at least 3 hours before getting too excited. Note that this is the opposite of missing time, folks. Back home, no one believed a bit of his story. The film came back all pictures perfect, except of course for the ones taken in the other reality canyon. They were all dusty smudges tinted in a light green. About 11. Running around in the woods taking pictures of anything that moves like bees and stuff. Start aiming behind me. Get bored. Go home. Look at camera and find this. It was probably just sunlight reflecting off the lens though. Here's a timestamp of the only printout I made. My camera had shitty quality at the time. Okay, so I've been lurking here on /x/ for a long time, and this is actually the first time I start a thread. But since I cannot really rationalize it, I'd like your help to figure out what happened. Be me last night, in car with boyfriend. We were driving through the Vosgian Forest, in France, coming back from a party at a friend's house. It was about 1 a.m, we were talking about stuff, listening to music, when on the side of the road, about 20 meters in the forest, I see some light, a bit dim. I don't really care, but I notice it because I never noticed a house around there. About 2 kilometers later, same stuff on the other side of the road. And again about 1 kilometer later. This is strange because there are no houses around, just trees. We see more and more lights, now there are 2 to 5 at the same time. This is not really freaky, just odd. Becomes kind of a game, we try now to guess how many lights we will see, but after a little while, nothing, just pitch black except the car's headlights. Finally no more forest. After a curve we see another light on a hill. As we come closer we see a cloaked figure, dressed in black, or dark grey-brownish, with a hood. He was holding a torch in his hands. Not an electrical one. A burning wood stick. And then that's it. We came through a village shortly after and went on our road with nothing in particular. But it was really odd. And I have no idea of what happened. I've searched the web to see if there was some kind of party, but there was nothing. It's nothing big, I know, but it was just plainly strange to think there was about 50 dudes in the woods, standing still with torches. I admit I had a few drinks, but my boyfriend didn't and saw the same thing as I did. Anyone with an idea about what it was? Sorry for my poor English, I'm a French fog. I hope it was understandable though. Be me. Live in deep woods Midwest. Have 60 acres of woods about a quarter-mile walk form my backyard. We moved onto the property when I was around 13. Perfect age for exploration. Never venture more than a third the way in. The brush is dense and there are no paths or trails. One evening my dad tells me he wants me to walk to the end and back to try and find game trails for deer season. Do as he says. Start walking, bring sandwich and water. About 15 minutes into the walk I'm the furthest I've ever been. Find a stream, a few game trails, some old barbed wire, and rusted sheet metal. Keep walking. Greater than 15 more minutes in and I'm nearing the end. Suddenly I see it. What looks like a Victorian-style staircase sitting there. The wood on it is badly rotted, must have been sitting there for years. Wonder how it got there. I'm far away from it but through the trees I see someone walk around it like they're looking for something. They then climb up it, trip, and fall. Adrenaline starts pum-pung. Don't see them get back up. The person was wearing the same colored shirt as me. Figure they must have gotten hurt so I walk over to it. Walk around it. Don't see them anywhere. Walk up it. I slip and fall down. Hit my head on a rock. I'm out for a solid hour. Enough time for the sun to start to set. At this point I'll still be halfway in by the time it's dark, and don't have a flashlight. Start gunning it back to the house. Hitting vines, stepping on thorns. Make it to the house just as the last bit of twilight fades. Adrenaline pumping like crazy. I get inside and lay down on the couch. No one else is home. Think about what happened. Realize that I did the exact same actions as the person I thought I saw. That person was me. I watched myself trip. Spend the rest of the month researching time skips. Eventually forget about it. I never went that far into the woods again. That staircase shouldn't have been there and there was definitely something malicious about it. Alright you/x/file freaks. I have a story to tell you about the little people encounter I had about 6 years ago or so, basically the Cherokee version of the Fae. I live in the southeast of the USA, in a region called the Blue Ridge Mountains. Basically a lot of really pretty foothills and some large mountains. Great, beautiful place. I am about 13 to 14 years old. Recently our neighbors have been doing some massive construction project that rips down a large section of forest. In the woods messing around with friends, IDK what we were doing. We all start to feel uneasy. We realize it's pretty quiet and the animals aren't making any noises. Start to hear what sounds like rocks clicking. Just one or two clicks together, but definitely in succession. Just a tap tap. Tap tap tap. See something out of the corner of my eye. Looks like a little humanoid figure, but basically just like a shadow is all. Turn to look, but it's gone. This happens 3 to 5 times in the next 15 minutes or so. Me and both of my friends are seeing this. My friend, who is part Cherokee, starts freaking the F out, saying that it's the little people, and he turns around and runs out of the forest. We're not very deep in. Freaks all of us out, so we follow him. Friend explains that in Cherokee lore, the little people are small cave-dwelling mountain people that like to play tricks on individuals. These people do not like to be disturbed or followed though, and will mess with people who disturb their land. Continue. It escalates pretty quickly from here over the next couple weeks. Pic related, people looked like this but only about 2 to 3 feet tall. My friend told me that he also saw a hawk earlier, which he thought he remembered his grandfather told him was a bad omen. We don't go into the woods over the next couple days. One afternoon after school, I decide to go out into the woods behind my house again. Again, it is very quiet and I generally feel uneasy. Again, I hear that clicking. Tap tap. Tap, tap, tap tap tap. Again I feel as if I am being watched. I look over to my left, maybe 200 feet away or so. The forest behind my house goes down into a little gully and then arches back up to start climbing a mountain. Across the gully I see one of the small creatures that I saw out of the corner of my eye again. It is there for a moment and then vanishes. I freak and run out of the woods. So basically at this time, I am pretty sure that this is some weird paranormal shit I'm seeing, or at least my friend is right, and there's some fae people or something in the woods. Skip to several days later. We see hundreds of coyote tracks in the woods and some mud. Literally hundreds, like a whole pack had run through. Never had coyotes before. As the next week goes on, we continue to go into the woods and continue to eventually see bullshit in there. We played airsoft a lot, so we always went in. Each time convinced ourselves that nothing was there, only to hear the rocks click and then get out of there in a near panic. Alright, I'm back. Forest work continues. The area around it is becoming more and more deforested. Little people start to get angry and mean. Go outside on birthday with friends. Middle of the night. Hear clicking, when all of a sudden my friend gets hit by something. Oh Anon, what was that? Haha. No one knows WTF he's talking about. Look down and there's a palm-sized rock in the brush behind him. These guys hit him with a rock. As the weeks go on, the small pranks begin to increase in time and severity. Not even in the woods now, things happen around the house. One time around dusk, see a small figure standing on the driveway at the top of the street. Shadowy figure, not even hiding at this point. Blinks in and out from one location to another. Begins to blink quickly towards my friends. Chases us all the way down towards his house, maybe a quarter mile away before we get inside. A couple days after this, my friend is inside his house and goes to bed normally. Remembers having bad dream about the little people. Wakes up in his shower completely naked. Thinks he sees something in the mirror. Quickly looks and sees nothing while simultaneously getting the biggest nosebleed he can remember. At this point the construction is almost complete. All of us kids are freaked out. We don't want to go out into the woods very much anymore. My friend goes to talk to his grandpa. The Cherokee one. Tells him to have all of us go into the woods and tell them we mean no harm and are not interested in seeing them or disturbing them. Does some Cherokee prayer for the event, apparently IDK. We do it. Tell the little people to leave us alone, please. Never see them again after that day. So that's my story, what was going on there. The little people are not supposed to look like shadow people, but that's what we saw. They usually have drums that they hit to get people to follow them into the forest, but if you do, then they deceive you and you get lost. Hope you guys enjoyed. Big thanks to one of the avid listeners for sending me art supplies, to further improve my drawings in the videos. You are a legend.